Sometimes, without intending to, you begin to step back, not out of anger, not to make a point, just a quiet instinct to protect your peace. You stop overextending, stop showing up out of habit. And as you create space, things become clearer. The noise fades, and in that silence, you begin to see not everyone cherished your presence. Some simply depended on it. You begin to notice who reaches out, who respects your space, who asks, "Are you okay?" and who just gets uncomfortable with the new you that no longer exists for their convenience. Carl Jung understood this shift. He understood that the self isn't just found through addition, it's uncovered through subtraction. You remove the noise, the need to be needed, the compulsion to reply, the fear of disappointing people. You stop dancing for everyone else's comfort, and what's left? You, raw, unfiltered, untouched by the demands of the external world. But let's be honest, you didn't always live this way. There was a time you were always available. You responded fast. You picked up every call. You gave time you didn't have. You said yes when everything in you screamed no. Why? Because you thought being available made you valuable. You thought being present for everyone meant you mattered. You thought being the one they could always count on was love. But it wasn't love. It was fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of being replaced. Fear of being seen as selfish. And so, without knowing it, you became emotionally bankrupt, handing out pieces of yourself like free samples, hoping someone would finally say, "You've done enough. You can rest now." But no one did, because the moment you train people to expect your constant presence, they stop seeing it as a gift and start seeing it as a given. And that's where Jung's wisdom cuts the deepest. He said, "Loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you." And what's more important than your peace? What's more sacred than your time? What's more valuable than your self-respect? When you stop being available, you're not being rude, you're being honest. You're telling the world, "I am no longer for everyone. I'm no longer a product. I'm a person, a whole one." And at first, they'll resist. They'll guilt you, call you distant, say you've changed, because in their world, you existed to serve their story. But now, you're writing your own. And here's the truth most people won't admit. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you that made them feel better. They miss the convenience, the validation, the free emotional labor. But they never stop to ask, what did it cost you? It cost you your energy, your clarity, your peace, your voice. But not anymore. Now you're reclaiming it, slowly, powerfully, and without apology. Because Jung didn't believe in half-selves. He believed in wholeness, integration, balance. He believed that unless you pull away from the noise of the collective, the crowd, the culture, the expectations, you'd never hear your own soul. And that soul, it's not loud. It's not needy. It speaks in quiet knowing. But to hear it, you have to stop being available to everything else, to the late-night texts from people who never ask how you're really doing, to the situationships that drain your worth, to the friends who only call when they need something, to the commitments that steal your energy and give nothing back. You have to cut the cords, not in anger, not in hate, but in truth. You're not rejecting people. You're protecting yourself. You're not abandoning others. You're returning to your center. And when you do that, everything changes. Your presence becomes heavier. Your words hit harder. Your silence commands attention, because people finally realize access to you was never a right. It was a privilege, and when you stop being available, the ones who truly see you won't panic. They won't beg. They'll pause, reflect, and meet you where you are, with respect, with care, with earned presence. But the rest, they'll fall away. And let them. Because you're not here to be everything to everyone. You're here to be fully yourself, even if that means being alone for a while. And in that space, in that stillness, you begin to rebuild, not as a reaction, but as a return to boundaries, to purpose, to clarity, to the truth you silenced. When you stop being available, people show you who they really are. It's not just that the energy shifts, the masks fall off. Suddenly, the friend who always had your back starts acting cold. The partner who claimed they loved you begins to feel distant. The people who once called daily, now they're silent. Not because they're confused, but because they're exposed. Exposed by your absence, exposed by your boundaries, exposed by your refusal to perform anymore. And this is where it gets uncomfortable, because part of you still wants to explain, still wants to clarify, still wants to say, I'm not ignoring you, I'm just protecting myself. But Carl Jung wouldn't tell you to explain. He'd tell you to observe. Observe what people do when they no longer have instant access to you. Observe who respects the pause and who resents it. Observe what rises in you when you step back. The guilt, the fear, the impulse to people please one more time. And that is the work. Because this isn't just about cutting people off. It's about confronting the part of you that was addicted to being needed. That version of you who got validation through overgiving, who felt important only when others depended on your availability. That wasn't love. That was survival. You needed to feel useful because you were afraid you weren't lovable. You gave too much because you didn't know how to receive. You were always there for them because you were never really there for yourself. And now you are. Now you sit with the silence. Now you face the discomfort of not being the hero in someone else's story. Now you ask the deeper question Jung would have forced you to ask. Who are you without the role? Who are you when you stop performing helpfulness? When you stop responding just to keep the peace? When you stop sacrificing your own needs for people who never asked what they were? This is the individuation process, the journey back to self. It's messy, it's lonely, and it will cost you parts of your life you once thought were permanent. But it's worth it, because when you stop being available, you start becoming visible, not to others, but to yourself. You begin to hear the voice you silenced. You begin to feel the fatigue you ignored. You begin to understand why certain conversations left you drained, why certain rooms felt heavy, why certain people never really saw you, only the version of you that served them. And when you see that, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee the friend who only calls to unload. You can't unsee the pattern of saying yes and immediately resenting it. You can't unsee the life you built to keep everyone else comfortable while you slowly disappeared in it. So now you reclaim it, not by fighting, not by forcing, but by retreating. Carl Jung taught that wholeness doesn't come from fixing everything around you. It comes from integrating what's inside you. And what's inside you right now? Exhaustion from always being the strong one, from answering every call, from holding space for people who never held it for you, from being on all the time, from being when you weren't. But the deeper exhaustion isn't from them. It's from betraying yourself. Every time you said yes when you meant no. Every time you swallowed your truth just to avoid disappointing someone. Every time you kept the peace and destroyed yourself to do it. But not anymore. Now you move differently. You don't explain your silence. You don't rush to reply. You don't apologize for needing space because your time is no longer up for auction. Your presence is no longer free. And this confuses people because you trained them to expect the old you, the always available you, the always listening you, the always accommodating you. But here's the hard truth. If people only loved the version of you that erased yourself for them, they didn't love you. They loved your usefulness. And that love has an expiration date, the moment you choose yourself. But here's what's beautiful. When you stop being available, you don't just lose people, you make room. Room for depth, room for peace, room for relationships where you don't have to be on to be worthy, where you don't have to carry everything to feel valued, where you are loved not for how much you give, but for who you are. But to find that, to build that, you must clear space. And clearing space requires boundaries, not walls, not cruelty, but sacred lines. Lines that protect your energy, lines that tell the world, I am not here to be consumed. I am here to live. Because that's what Jung meant by transformation. Not just becoming more, but becoming less. Less available to everything that distracts you from yourself. And when you do that, everything changes. People will treat you differently, some with confusion, some with anger, and a rare few with respect. You'll walk into a room and speak less, but be heard more. You'll stop replying instantly and be taken more seriously. You'll no longer be everywhere, but when you do show up, you'll matter, because scarcity creates value. And you, after all this time, are learning to value yourself. When you stop being available, everything changes, not just who you lose, but who you become. There's something powerful that happens when you stop being available. You stop being used, not just by others, but by old versions of yourself. Versions that were desperate to be chosen. Versions that couldn't handle silence. Versions that thought attention meant love and giving meant survival. Carl Jung believed that your true self isn't found in what you show the world. It's found in what you withdraw from the world, the parts of you that only emerge when you're no longer performing. And that's why absence is more revealing than presence. Because when you step away, the truth comes forward. You see who actually valued you and who just needed you. You see what relationships were mutual and which ones relied on your silence. You see how much of your life was designed around maintaining peace outside while you ignored the war inside. And in that clarity, you start to rebuild. This is where Jung's concept of individuation becomes real. It's not a philosophy, it's a path, a return to center, not to isolate forever, but to separate long enough to know who you are when no one else is asking you to be something for them. And who are you when no one's asking you to fix their pain? When no one's waiting on your reply? When no one is depending on your availability? What do you want? What do you need? What kind of life are you building? When it's not a reaction to someone else's. Most people never ask those questions because most people never pause long enough to hear the answers. They stay in motion, in service, in performance, because stillness is scary. Stillness shows you who you really are, but it also shows you who you could be, because the self you've lost isn't gone. It's just buried. Buried under obligations, under survival strategies, under 1,000 tiny moments when you said, Yes, I'll be there when you really needed to be here with yourself. And now you're digging through that, quietly, deliberately, powerfully. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to defend it. You don't need to justify pulling back, because true change doesn't require approval. It only requires integrity. And integrity means you stop abandoning yourself for connection. It means you stop leaking your peace into people who've never earned it. It means you stop selling your presence for crumbs of appreciation. You begin to operate differently. You don't respond instantly. You don't fill every silence. You don't explain why you're unavailable, because the explanation was always a form of guilt, and guilt is no longer your compass. Your compass is your clarity. So now you wait, you watch, you choose, not from urgency but from alignment. And in that slowness, you become rare. People feel it. Your energy changes. You walk into a room and take up space, not with volume, but with presence. Because you're no longer trying to be liked. You're simply being real. And the real version of you, it doesn't owe constant access. It doesn't owe endless explanations. It doesn't owe anyone the version of you that destroyed your peace just to keep the room calm. Carl Jung would say, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But that's the doorway. When you finally say, this is who I am. I don't need to be everything. I don't need to be everywhere. I don't need to be available just to feel valuable. That's when freedom begins. Not loud freedom, not dramatic, just quiet, clean, uncompromised. And that freedom, it will cost you. It will cost you roles you used to love, connections you used to cling to, versions of yourself you used to perform with such pride. But what you gain is you, the self that never needed to overgive, the self that didn't panic when ignored, the self that knows my presence is not a service, it is sacred, and that self becomes your home, a place you return to, not because you're tired of others, but because you finally remember that you are enough, not because of what you do or who you please or how much you give, but simply because you exist. When you live from that truth, you no longer seek validation. You embody it. You no longer chase love. You attract it. You no longer try to prove your worth. You know it. This is the power of becoming less available, not to punish the world, but to reconnect with yourself. To sit in the stillness of your own being and say, here I am, whole, worthy, enough. And when you say that, not out loud but from within, everything truly changes. And from that place of quiet knowing, you begin to live differently. You choose with intention, love without fear, and move through the world with a grounded heart. You no longer need to be seen to feel real. You simply are. And that is the beginning of everything.